Hey team, today we're going to create a Next.js Starter. We're going to learn what a starter is and how it's useful to get us more productive. I'm Colby Fayok, and if this is your first time here, make sure you hit subscribe for future updates. Next.js coins itself as a React framework for production. It comes with a ton of features baked in to make your life easier when building React apps. If you've used Next.js before, it comes with a pre-baked template that you can get by running create next app. Create next app will go through and install all the dependencies and set up that default template. The cool thing though is we can pass in our own example template with a GitHub URL so we can create our own starter. So the first thing you want to do is create the next app. So we're going to run yarn create next app, and we're going to specify the directory, which I'm going to say my Next.js Starter. It will go through, install the dependencies, and create that basic app where we can then cd into that directory, and we can run yarn dev, and we get our local development server, which we can open right up in the browser and have our new app. Now, since we just created this next app, we can actually consider this our starting point for our starter. A Next.js Starter is just simply a Next.js app, so anything we do with it, we can immediately store it in GitHub and use it as a starter. To test this, I'm going to change that welcome message to my Next.js Starter, and we can see that change in our browser. Now I'm going to create a new GitHub repo called my Next.js Starter, which we'll use. Once we have our repository set up and we have our commit with that change, we can set up our repository by adding the remote origin, and we can push that up to master. And we can now see the changes. Now to test that as a starter, we can run yarn create next app, and we'll call the directory my app. Then we can pass in the example with E and then the GitHub repo URL. And when it's done, we can see that it downloaded those files from the repo, but when we cd into that directory and we run yarn dev again, we can open up our local server, and we can see that it now says my Next.js Starter. So the goal with starters is to give something additional to the default template. We want to add additional features that'll make it easy to use something that we want to use. I like to use Sass with my CSS, so how about we add that as our starter feature? The cool thing about Next.js is it supports the SCSS and Sass extensions natively, so all we need to do is actually install Sass itself. So back on the starter repo, I'm going to run yarn add Sass, and once that's finished, I'm going to run my dev server again, and we have our page back. So now to test this out, we can actually use some SCSS files. So the first thing I'm going to do is in my styles directory, I'm going to change this home module.css file to SCSS. I'm going to open up that file, and I'm going to make sure I change that import to SCSS as well. We can see that nothing's changed, which is good because it means that it's working. One of the cool features of Sass is nesting, so we can actually take some of these styles like in the footer here, and we can nest them. That way it looks a little bit cleaner for us. So I finished nesting the footer styles, and I also nested the title styles. And we can see that even with that change, it's still working just as expected. Another cool feature is CSS variables. So what we can do is we can take this color here, and at the top, we can add color primary and add that blue value. And then back where we stole that from, we can add that variable. And we can see things are still working. So I'm also going to replace the other instances of that blue with our new variable. Now, since we have that as a variable though, we can easily change that color. So if I wanted to make it blue violet, we just easily changed all of our styles to that color. So we proved that Sass works and we have it installed with our project. Now we want to make that as part of our starter. So at this point, it's just adding the commit and pushing it out to GitHub, and then it'll be ready to go. Similar to before, we can run yarn create next app, and let's call it my Sass app, and paste in the E, which is our GitHub address. Similar to before, we can see that it downloaded the files from our starter. We can cd into that directory, run yarn dev, and we have our local server with our new app ready to go. So we have our starter, but what are some best practices? I created a similar Sass starter before this just as a kind of demo for getting started with this. When people use starters, ultimately they want to use them to be productive easily. So we can do things like adding documentation to add that exact create app command. That way they can easily copy and paste that without having to worry about the Git history. We can also provide some info about like what's inside, including that Sass, just so people have an idea of what to expect. And since for sale works nice with Next, we can easily add a deploy button. That way somebody can click that and easily start up a new Vercel project with Next. So if you followed along, you just created a new Next.js starter. Starters are super helpful whether you're just trying to avoid having to repeat the same steps each time you create a new app, or if you're helping other people use cool tools. If you like this video, make sure you hit thumbs up and subscribe for future updates. Thanks for watching.